in Nashville for the next 2 weekends, Saturday, Sunday, Saturday, Sunday. And then March 3rd, I leave to go to India for another series of transmissions to receive from the head of my order. Then in April, I go to Malaysia to see my mom and family. Then in May, I will be back a few weeks, and then back to Peru towards middle end of June. Peru, then Ecuador,
Mm.
and then at some point Little Rock, I think.
July. Yeah. And July? July.
Right, July, yeah, right.
No changing. No, 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 no.
Maybe on the way back from either Peru or Ecuador, on the way moving up. Assuming I remain a desirable presence in the new landscape here, I'll come back from out of the country.
Maybe we could nail it down by the time you leave in March.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So, yes, already April, I think the last 2 weeks of April, Mexico. And then back in Asheville for, I hope, all of September. And then all of October. And then November, Bhutan, I think. In case anyone wants to go to Bhutan, it's an organized tour in Bhutan, followed by Nepal, a retreat in Nepal, and an organized tour to Bhutan. So stay tuned. And then hopefully calm down for a little bit for a while.
When is the retreat in Nepal?
It will be following the Bhutan trip.
Which
So
is?
will be like maybe very early in November. You will be back in time for Thanksgiving for sure. So like 10 days in Bhutan for people who want to do Bhutan, then followed by a week in Nepal, in which at least 4, if not 5 days, will be a retreat, probably on the mindfulness of breathing, the way that His Holiness the Drikung Kyabgon is teaching, which is a combination of all levels, from so-called Hinayana to Vajrayana, working with breath as the object of meditation. So people can do just the Nepal piece, and also do Bhutan plus Nepal, or just the Bhutan piece and leave Nepal alone. Maybe when all is said and done, it's 10 days Bhutan, 10 days Nepal, because especially for people who have never been to Nepal, I'm sure they want to see more than the retreat space that we're using.
Where is the retreat? Where's the retreat space?
I think, I don't know yet, will be right outside of Kathmandu in this place called Nagakut, where you can see the Himalayan range. There's this one old kind of built to look like a palace, but it was never one. I mean, Nepali palace, not like, palace. But it's built to look like a palace, and then it's not nice. This time, right before I came back from Nepal, I spent a few nights there, and I instantly liked it. and I started talking to the people who run the hotel, the possibility of doing this. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah, so where are you all in Santideva, Way of the Bodhisattva?
Chapter 5.
Chapter 5.
We're about halfway through chapter 5.
Sorry?
We're about halfway through. I think we ended with verse 54
Oh,
in chapter.
wow.
Yeah.
You're going to be done very soon.
Mhm. Yeah, but we can go slowly. It's okay.
54, huh? Okay. So let me say a few things about this.
Yes.
Chapter 5 and chapter 4. So if we zoom out of the specifics of what's in chapter 4 and chapter 5, there is an overall structure to the 10 chapters of this Bodhisattva. These 10 chapters, if you look at the table of contents, so the first 3 chapters, chapter 1 highlights what is so special and amazing and important about bodhicitta. Chapter 1. Chapter 2 and 3 are 2 parts of a ceremony, actually, for how to take this, how to generate in a ceremonial way, bodhicitta. Chapter 2 and 3, actually. And together, chapter 2 and 3, even though the titles of these 2 chapters don't show it, but together they constitute the practice of giving. The practice of giving. Even the so-called confession part, which I already explained how the word confession doesn't capture, right, the meaning of what's going on there. In Tibetan, it's called tongsha. Tong is to, in this case, to expose, not to hide anymore. To the willingness to lay bare, to make clear, to expose the unskillful actions of body, speech, and mind that we have engaged in, and therefore resulted in the experience of suffering for ourselves and for others. So we lay bare. That's one part of Dongsha. Shakpa is to then lay aside. Lay bare, lay aside, put aside. That is a form of giving, actually. When you give up, when you offer away, you clear away your afflictive emotions, you clear away your mental defilements, you clear away the unskillful actions of body, speech, and mind. It's such an offering to yourself and to people around you. You become much more likable, much more easy to get along, first and foremost, with yourself. When you give up these unskillful actions of body, speech, and mind, the mental defilements, the 3 poisons, basic ignorance, to whatever degree we're able to give them, expose that and set aside, put aside, right? And to that degree more, we become tolerable, we become likable to ourselves. And when liking ourselves, tolerating ourselves, then even deeper, liking ourselves occurs in such a skillful manner, then you become much more agreeable to others, much more likable to others, right? I mean, what better offering to give than that offering to yourself and to others? Then there's also the offering to the great beings, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and the Arhats, out of our admiration for the qualities that they embody. So together, chapter 2 and 3 pertains to the perfection of giving. Chapter 4 and 5 called carefulness and vigilant introspection. These two pertains to the next paramita. The next perfection is the paramita of disciplined conduct. But here, instead of Shantideva discussing the prescriptions and the proscriptions, what we should engage in and what we should not engage in, instead of having a chapter, right, delineating the code of conduct of the monastics, which was his original audience, or the details of the precepts and the vows that we take as lay people. Instead of doing that, for disciplined conduct, he chose to emphasize the mental, emotional qualities that are needed in order for disciplined conduct to be natural and genuine. Instead, when we try to have disciplined conduct, or sometimes often translated as like ethical conduct, it's really beyond ethics. It covers ethics for sure. Yeah? Ethics is what impacts others, right? It covers that for sure, but it also has even a broader range than just ethics, which is how to carry oneself, how to be physically occupying space, how to verbally occupy space, how to mental emotionally occupy space, and what mental qualities are needed to do it in a way that doesn't turn disciplined conduct, ethical conduct, into uptight morality and judgment and guilt, all the stuff that comes with, behaving yourself in the context of religion. A lot of baggage. Many of us are probably kind of recovering from religion in that sense. Always remembering being yelled at, what you can do, cannot do, should not do, should do. So for Shila, for disciplined conduct to be cultivated according to how the Buddha explained it, these two qualities is what we should develop: carefulness and vigilant introspection. Then the following 4 chapters, the title of those chapters match directly the following corresponding 4 other perfections, 4 other paramitas: the paramita of patience, of diligence, of meditative concentration, and wisdom. Then chapter 10, dedication. So you could also divide this and say that 1, 2, 3 chapters, chapter 3 rather, taking hold of bodhicitta, is aspiration bodhicitta. Then 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 is like action, engagement bodhicitta. Yeah. So now you are around verse 50 of vigilant introspection. So carefulness, that chapter precedes vigilant introspection. Carefulness is about knowing how to pause and not simply let triggers, not simply let external conditions dictate where we go mental, emotionally. So in order not to be dragged around by external conditions, whether coming from other people or it's also considered external conditions, including our own unhealthy habit patterns, our own messed up programs that make it so easy for us to go down the road of suffering. So maintaining carefulness, knowing when to pause, knowing when to say no to being dragged around by these external factors, external forces. So this is, you know, the main emphasis of chapter 4. Here it says, you know, once you have adopted bodhicitta, you have to protect what you have adopted. Don't go back on your word. It says, stay on the course. Stay the course. Right? Don't go back on your word. So specifically here, carefulness is careful to protect this aspiration that you have given rise to. Because especially at the beginning, this aspiration is fragile. Easily broken on the one hand and easily forgotten on the other hand. And so the care you have to bring is anchored on caring about this great aspiration. And careful not to be led off course by distractions. Distractions that come in the form of suffering, distractions that come in the form of failures, distraction that comes in the form of pleasure, distractions that come in the form of promise. All of that we need to see clearly. See them clearly for what they are, which is the carefulness that we have to apply in order to not be distracted, in order not to be led in the wrong direction. So vigilant introspection, this one is a little bit, maybe you could say, in contrast to carefulness. Carefulness is almost like a safeguarding that you are doing. Vigilant introspection is a more active aspect of this. And they are two sides, you know, of the same coin. But vigilant introspection is a more active. So you have already looked at this chapter up until 54, right?
But please feel free to say anything you want to say about those earlier verses. We're not.
Yeah. Vigilant introspection, that chapter begins by the Buddha saying, you know, the elephant of your mind. Here we have, like, you know, stuffed toys that is elephants, right? And keychain that is elephants. I would think that elephants are really cute. But in India, you know, elephants, you know, yes, on the one hand, it's a symbol of sturdiness, royalty, because kings used to ride on elephants. That's like basically the equivalent of like having a monster truck in Arkansas. Driving around on a monster truck. But in this context, you know, it's like drunk driving in a monster truck is the elephant that they're talking about here. And so there are drunken elephants in India. How? Why? What's the counter for elephant groups? Family? Do you all know?
Is it a herd?
Herd?
I'm just.
Maybe let's say herd. Frequently herds, elephant herds would chance upon fermented fruit and they will eat and then they will get drunk, literally, and then rampage through villages and, plantations and cause a lot of destruction. And so a mind that is not trained, a heart that is not trained, causes that kind of damage, causes that kind of suffering. And so on verse 4, tigers, lions, elephants, bears, snakes, and every hostile foe. Here talking about actual tigers, lions, elephants, bears, snakes, and every hostile foe. Those who guard the prisoners in hell, ghosts and ghouls, and every evil wraith. By simple binding of this mind alone, all these things are likewise bound. All the threats and dangers that is around us, if we know how to safeguard our heart, safeguard our mind, then we will be protected from these dangers. By simply taming this mind, this drunken elephant of mind alone, then all these threats, all these difficulties are under control. For all anxiety and fear and pain and boundless quantity, their source and wellspring is the mind itself. This is also the essence of Dzogchen Mahamudra teachings. Simply and directly, this point. Right? Even in the more basics, so to say, Buddhist teachings, such as in the Dhammapada, the opening verse, the two opening verses in the Dhammapada clearly lays this out already. All things begin with the mind, with our hearts. When the mind of the hearts is obscured, then suffering follows, like shadows follow forms. When the mind of the heart is unobscured, then that's the cessation of suffering. And that's the arising of genuine happiness. 7, the hellish instruments to torture living beings, who invented them for such intent? The mind. Who has forged this burning iron ground? A reference to descriptions of hell realms. And where have all these demon women sprung? Monks, are terrified of demon women's. So there are no inherently existing, demon women, okay? Just spoken of in relation to the anxieties and the fantasies of, young men, living unnaturally. Yes, the Buddha knew that. It's not like a Buddha not aware, but that's the discipline, right? So not meant for everyone. So anyway, whence have all these demon women sprung, In part, certain descriptions, again, of the hell realms, there's one that says, again, clearly tailored to male, and we can assume male audience that is attracted to females rather than other males, right? So they don't talk about that. So the majority. So they say that when you enter certain hell realms, you'll see all these seductive women calling you. And so you like, yay, not sure what's going on. Everything else here is terrible, but there are these, seductive women, and you run up there and then you like embrace them. And it says, the moment you embrace them, they turn into these pillars of fire that will burn you to nothing. So that's the reference to these demon women. They look like objects of desire. They look like they're happy to see you. But when you go up to them and do whatever you do with them, it will burn you. So if the Buddha was giving these specific teachings to women who are attracted to men, I'm sure there are these demon men, and so on and so forth, right? So that's what that footnote there is saying, but that footnote there is a lot more elegant, I'm sure, in explaining why it says here, demon women. All are but the offspring of the sinful mind, the misguided mind, the mind that is lost. So this language of sinful, the translator comes from a Benedictine background, was a Benedictine monk for many years. Before he became Buddhist and Tibetan Buddhist, and then did several sets actually of Buddhist intensive retreats. So, but all these are offsprings of the mind, the mistaken mind. This the mighty sage has said. Throughout the triple world together, there's no greater bane than mind itself. Here, mind itself is not a technical term. In other contexts, mind itself is talking about nature of mind. Now, obviously, if we're talking about nature of mind, that is not the bane of anyone's existence. That is the liberating factor of everyone. Here, there's no greater bane than mind itself is talking about the unruly mind, the untrained mind, the mind that constantly leads to suffering. So here, then it gives the example in verses 9 moving on, how when we talk about, so to again, to bring home that point, it's the mind principally that we're training with. It says, now, for example, what we call the perfection of giving or the perfection of generosity, right? That is not perfected on the basis of you having solved the poverty of the world, because that's impossible. If that was the requirement, then Buddha Shakyamuni obviously did not complete the perfection of giving or the perfection of generosity, because there are still poor people in the world. So how can we say that generosity has been perfected? It's when any and all, right, seeds, any and all inclinations to be stingy, to be greedy, has been completely dispelled from your mind. So again, highlighting, it's the mind that we need to guard. It's the mind, the heart, that we need to be vigilant about. Where could beings, fishes, and the rest be placed to keep them safe from being killed? Deciding to refrain from every harmful act is said to be the discipline conduct. So here, disciplined conduct. So generally speaking, when Buddha taught about disciplined conduct, he sometimes, in some places, he said, the essence of disciplined conduct is to restrain yourself, to give up, to be completely, for your actions of body, speech, and mind to be completely without harm. So that's why here Santideva says, and what does without harm mean? Does it mean that beings will no longer be harmed under all circumstances. He says, no, that's not what it means. It means from your own heart, from your own mind, any inclination, any seed of wanting to harm others have been cleared. You're done with that. You no longer have those tendencies, inclinations, intentions, schemes, scams to harm others. And so then, very famous, these next two. Harmful beings are everywhere, like space itself. Some of us feel more acutely that this is true recently, and will continue to be a while. So this is very good for us to take to heart, okay? We all, or not all, but many of us, and I think all the refugees that come to EBS probably feel this way right now. Harmful beings are everywhere, like space itself. Impossible it is that all should be suppressed. You cannot achieve the goal of suppressing all these harmful beings. But let this angry mind alone be overthrown. Overthrow the tyrant of the mind, and it is as though all foes have been subdued. And the next one is very famous. It says, to cover all the earth with sheets of leather, where could such amounts of skin be found? Besides, the vegans are not going to be very happy with this plan. To cover all the earth with sheets of leather. Impossible, it says. But with the leather soles of just my shoes, it is as though I cover all the earth. With just 2 small pieces of leather, you can walk the whole earth, not fearing, right? The thorns, the stones, all these harsh surfaces no longer is a problem. But often what we end up trying to do is the equivalent of trying to cover the whole earth with leather. And thus the outer course of things I myself cannot restrain, but let me restrain my mind. And once I am able to do that, what else is there to restrain? So he goes on to say that people try this and try that, but they don't seem to see, that more basic than any of these things is learning how to safeguard the heart, learning how to safeguard the mind. And so much so, on verse 22, my property, my honor, all can freely go. My body and my livelihood as well, and even other virtues may decline, but never will I let my mind regress. And all you who would protect your minds, maintain your mindfulness and introspection. Guard them both at cost of life and limb. I join my hands beseeching you. Then on 25 it says, so if you don't develop this vigilant introspection, you may hear a lot of teachings, read a lot of books, think about them, and sit down and meditate about them. But if you don't apply introspection, then it's like water seeping from a leaking jar. No matter how much you learn, it has no purpose. In fact, you'll lose them. All the information you're collecting, unless you are using that information, right, and using that information to shine a light on your mind, on your reaction to things, whether you're mental emotional reaction, whether your physical reaction, whether your verbal reaction, unless you pay close attention to that, you apply introspection to that, and then all the Dharma you learn is just for entertainment, it's just for intellectual curiosity, with no real life impact. Then it's useless. And even when we have joyful diligence and become learned and have faith, but if we lack introspection, then we also, even with those wonderful qualities, if you don't introspect your actions of body, speech, and mind, then it's not much benefit. Lack of introspection, 27, is a thief. It slinks behind when mindfulness abates, and all the merit we have gathered in, it steals, and down we go to these lower realms. Defilements, mental defilements, are a band of robbers looking for their chance to pounce, to jump, and to injure us. They steal our virtue when they are calm, when their moment comes, and batter out the lives of happy destinies. Therefore, from the gateway of my mind, my mindfulness shall not have leave to stray. And if it wanders, it shall be recalled by thoughts of anguish in the lower worlds. A little bit of scare tactic, you know. Buddhists are not beyond using scare tactics to get you to behave. But of course, ultimately, is that going to work, you know? Maybe not as well as we wish it would. But at least a little bit of that, you know, can be helpful. It's like, you know, beyond logic. It's even the way the body just responds to certain things, you know. I'm sure all of us have experienced before, you know, at least once maybe, you know, if you drive, you know, I'm sure you have experienced before, right? Sometimes feeling drowsy on these long distance drives, but then you like 1 second losing your focus, and the car veers off a little bit, but it only happened for 1 second. You're able to pull it back, right? But when that happens, right, so much adrenaline, you're gonna be wide awake for the next 3 hours, you know. Kind of like the scare tactic here, you know. Snap you out of your drowsiness, yeah. And through fear and by the counsels of their abbots, and staying ever in their teacher's company, in those endowed with fortune and devotion, mindfulness can be easily cultivated. And that's verse 30. 34 says, you know, if you find that, you know, when your mind is tainted by some fault, then stop, don't do anything. Be like a log, is what it's saying. Be like a dead person, don't act, because when the mind is under the power, under the influence of the 3 poisons, and we act, then those actions are necessarily productive of suffering. But instead, you should become like a log, like a piece of wood. And here, 35, 36, you know, 37, 38, here is an example of disciplined conduct that is not necessarily about morality or ethics, but it's about the way you carry yourself in the world, the way that is considered appropriate and even beautiful for monks and nuns to carry themselves when they are out and about in the world. I shall never vacantly allow my gaze to wander all around, but rather with a focused mind will always go with eyes cast down. This is advice, especially for those who wear the Buddha's robes, going about their lives out in the world, so to say. It says, don't, stare here, stare there, ooh, wow, 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 wow. Just kind of bad example to others. But rather your sight should go downwards and be focused. But that I may relax my gaze, so always cast down also, don't need to be so rigid about it, but that I may relax my gaze, I'll sometimes raise my eyes and look around. So, being reasonable about it is also important. Not like, oh, you always have to just gaze down. And if there are some people standing in my sight, I see people within my sight that I recognize, that I know, I'll look at them and greet them with a friendly word. Hello, good morning, So also don't be so mindful, so focused, until you're like a zombie walking around. Also don't do that. And yet to spy the dangers on the road, I'll scrutinize the four directions one by one. So you're not just like a single-minded, narrow focus, but rather let your focus be panoramic. So I will survey the land in front and behind and carry on or else retrace my steps. In every time and place, therefore, I know my needs and act accordingly. My body shall remain like this, embarking thus upon a given course. From time to time, I'll verify, inquiring how my body is disposed. Meaning, while principally training with the mind, from time to time, you check your physical manifestation in the world, whether it's your body, whether it's your speech. Speech is also a form of manifesting in the world. You check that. Is my speech causing harm to others? Or is my speech actually bringing help to others? Those who strive to master concentration should never for an instant be distracted. They should always watch their minds inquiring, what is it doing now? Where is the mind now? What is it doing? And again, sometimes this becomes impossible. And sometimes when you are in danger on the one hand, or when you are partying during festivals, during festivities. In both cases, in both types of environments, I'll act as it seems best. Also, it's saying, don't be a pain, don't stick out, but as best as you are able to, given the context, given what's going on. For it is taught that rules of discipline may be relaxed in times of generosity. Right? In times of practicing generosity, right? Giving people understanding, giving people space, giving people opportunities, you can relax some of these rules of discipline. They're not talking about such rules as, you should not kill anyone. You should not deceive anyone. Right? They're not talking about that. They're talking more about, for example, the example given here. Your eyes should cast down. Only from time to time, you look up to survey, to make sure that there's no danger in any of the directions. And perchance during that time, you recognize someone, smile at them, say a kind word. It's talking about that. Those things can be flexible depending on what you feel is needed in that moment. When something has been planned and started on, attention should not drift to other things. With thoughts fixed on the chosen target, that and that alone should be pursued. I think often, outside the context of Dharma practice, if we don't do this, we also begin to like never finishing things that you promise. It's just very detrimental to your own reliability. You become unreliable. Forget about other people. You become unreliable first and foremost to yourself. And when you're unreliable to yourself, you cannot be very accepting or happy of yourself. And if you're not accepting or happy with yourself, it's going to be very hard to be accepting and happy with other people. Behaving in this way, all tasks are well performed. So again, stay the course, right? Then all tasks become well performed. And nothing is achieved by doing otherwise. If thus we act, the secondary defilement, lack of introspection, will not grow. And if you find yourself engaged in different kinds of pointless conversation and curious sights and the like of which abound, be rid of all delight and taste for them. Don't engage in small talk, especially when mischief may turn up. And if you find you're grabbing in the soil, or pulling out grass, or tracing idle patterns on the ground, remember the precepts of the blissful one. In fear, restrain yourself at once. So here, specifically, these are actually part of the training of monks. So monks will instantly recognize these are some of the minor trainings, which says, you should not simply just dig around in the ground. I mean, you and I kind of do that, we sit out on the ground and then we find a twig. Then the next thing we know, right, we're using that twig and digging the ground for no particular reason. And so here it says, don't do that. Why? Well, at the very least, consider how that's someone else's home. You're disturbing. Now, if you're digging to plant food, well, I guess no choice. It's also not to the extreme of, oh, don't dig, to plant vegetables, right? The point is, don't just mindlessly do things. Grubbing in the soil, pulling up the grass, which is what we do too. On a nice spring day, summer day, you sit out, on a patch of grass, you're just enjoying everything. Then before long, you're like plucking, right? Blades of grass, pulling, throwing, breaking, Why? It's just this unruly mind. Just need to do something. Now, it looks innocent enough, it's not like a decapitating, caterpillar heads or, the heads of little ants. Right? So in that sense, you're not causing that kind of harm. Actually, in the Buddhist cosmology, we don't consider plants to be sentient in the way that insects are sentient. So there's some line being drawn there. But just because, like decapitating a blade of grass is not considered killing, at the level that we're talking about here, at the subtleties that we're training here, if you mindlessly dig the soil, pull out petals of flowers, pulling out grass, this, right? Tracing idle patterns in the ground, again, back to that stick, draw. But then it's not like you're producing a Banksy, it's not like you're producing a Picasso. You're just mindlessly doing things. And if you are not vigilant about these small things, thinking that, oh, it doesn't matter, it's inconsequential. No, it matters. No, it becomes consequence because you are encouraging a particular habit. You are setting a particular program to be mindless. And that program, that conditioning has far-reaching implications. And so here it says, be careful about that. Yeah? "47. And when you feel the wish to move about, or even to express yourself in speech, first examine what is in your mind. For steadfast ones should act correctly." Feel like you need to say something, you want to say something, it says, examine your own mind. What is it about? Often it's about winning. And in order to win, we're very smart. We can come up with all the, seemingly right reasons why you should have said something. When, a lot of times it's about, I need to win, or my team need to win. So it says, but first examine what is in your mind. When the urge arises in your mind to feelings of desire or angry hate, do not act, be silent, do not speak, and like a log of wood, be sure to stay still. Like a corpse, don't move. And when your mind is wild or filled with mockery, or filled with pride and haughty arrogance, or when you would expose another's secret guilt, to bring up all dissensions, or to act deceitfully, or when you want to fish for praise, or criticize or spoil another's name, or use harsh language, sparring for a fight, it is then that like a log you should remain. And there's a few more of these that end with this refrain. Like a log you should remain. When you yearn for wealth, attention, fame, a circle of retainers serving you, and when you look for honors, recognition, it is then that like a log you should remain. And when you are inclined to overlook another's need and want to get the best thing for yourself, and when you feel like the urge to speak, it is then that like a log you should remain. Impatience, indolence, faint-heartedness, and likewise arrogance and careless speech, attachment to your side. I want to win. When these arise, it is then that like a log you should remain, or like a corpse you should remain. Examine thus yourself from every side. Take note of all your defilements and your pointless efforts. For thus the heroes of the Bodhisattva path seize firmly on such faults with proper remedies. So this is where you guys were last time, right? Any questions or comments?
Dr. Lye.
Mm-hmm.
So would it be a bad practice to be a sports fan? Like to be really strongly?
Is it bad?
Yeah, would that be like a dangerous practice for your mind and heart?
Well, what to say, right?
What?
What to say, right? So you can be a sports fan, Now start watching, the way you cheer for one and you boo at another, at least when I was a kid, I didn't have much interest in sports. I also had very little interest in, relatively speaking, even like games, like board games. And I'm not saying sports or board games are inherently problematic, but for me, I cannot get over the losing side, I don't want to lose. I didn't want to lose. I don't want to lose. Huh? So that's great, right? But I also found it very distracting that someone else is going to lose, and I can't get over that. So I never had much interest in myself. Um, but as you say, only cheering for your team, never booing the other team. I mean, if you're able to do it that way, then yeah, there's no problem. But as with everything, you can use as a way to examine the vigilant introspection, to
Yeah.
examine mind, to examine your response. For example, one famous Buddhist teacher, one of these superstars, Zhongsai Khyentse Rinpoche, famously, he loves soccer, football,
Mhm.
what the
Mhm.
world calls football. Oh, he loves that, every World Cup, he's there. I'm sure he's cheering away and even booing the other teams. Now, how does he handle it? Well, luckily we are not the spiritual tradition that uh, legislate all your actions, how many, you know, how many husbands you're allowed, how many wives you're allowed, how many soccer games you can go, and how many basketball games you can watch. So it's depends. It all really depends. It's about refining, right? Refining our hearts and our minds. So better to watch, football than to attend gladiator matches, right?
For dog fights, yeah.
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 So
Chicken fight.
yeah. So you don't have to be boring, or not yet.
It appears that any kind of competition is going to appeal to the ego. It seems like that is to be somewhat concerning. I think it's a great question.
Mhm. Yes, and the answer is not yes or no. Watch, keep watching.
Yes.
Watch your mind. Then you will reach your own conclusions. You don't need to ask me, is it good or is it bad?
That's what I like about this. It's this sort of an answer to every situation. I
Uh-huh.
mean,
Yes.
like right now, okay, I'm mad at people who voted for the other guy,
Uh-huh.
but they're just like me, so it's stupid to be mad at them. And
Yeah.
so look more, I mean, this solution of just looking in
Yes.
and noticing what I'm doing it works
Right.
always, everywhere.
Looking deeply. Yeah, looking
Yeah.
deeply. Then mm, the answers come, right? But if you kind of like impose from the outside, yeah, no, you should not do this. No, you cannot do that. No, this is not good. Then you may stop doing those things, but it doesn't come from a position of insight. And then not much use in the long run. Yeah, in the short run, it prevents you from causing harm. Of course, that's good. But the Buddha advocates us to do and to not do whatever it is that we do or not do from a position of insight, understanding. Then what we do and what we not do have the power to liberate.
Would you say that things that are of the ego are not inherently negative, or would you say they are?
Hmm?
Things that are of the ego, like competition.
I don't need to give you the answer, is my point. You look into it and you will find out. Until then, it's theory. And then you become too obsessed with, oh, that's egotistical, oh, that's egotistical, oh, that's egotistical, oh, that's egotistical. Actually, there's no exact term that translates, as far as I can tell, egotistical in Buddhist texts. It's depersonalized into, it's not. Egotistical, I think, carries a different kind of weight in how it's normally used. Buddha says, is there some unchanging element there or not? And if there isn't an unchanging element there, then what is it in that moment? It's different, you know. One of my students, I guess you could call him that. I don't know. I don't think of people that way. But anyway, he said that he's older than me. He said that his wife complains that after he became Buddhist, he's kind of become boring because he used to just curse left and right, you know, about just anything. Now he has stopped doing that, and it's like, oh, I didn't marry this boring guy that you've become. She was like, otherwise, you know, Buddhism seems to have been good for you, except for you become boring. Yeah, is it good? Is it bad? Well, look into it. Pay attention. Vigilant introspection. Let us not be downcast. Oh, this is very good. Write this and put it in prominent places around your house.
Yeah.
Let us not be downcast by the warring wants of childish persons quarreling. Their thoughts are bred from conflict and emotion. Let us understand and treat them lovingly. Hmm. 57, huh? So this is what I was trying to explain. Rather than looking at it from like the perspective of oh, that's egotistical, because I think with that, I don't know, I'm not saying Steve that that's necessarily what you mean or where you're coming from, but just using this as an opportunity to say it's in this work of introspection, vigilant introspection, carefulness, it should not turn into a judgment on your worth, your character, that oh, you are so egotistical. So if we look at the way 57, how it's framed, when acting irreproachably for our sake or the sake of others. So we have adopted this disciplined conduct, where at the level of body, speech, and mind, we are becoming, right? Or we feel that we are becoming more and more irreproachable, right? Like faultless even, right? Let us always bear in mind the thought that we are selfless. You see how it's hyphenated, because it's not talking about the usual use of the word selfless, as in Mother Teresa is selfless, so she throws her whole life to serving others. It's not talking about that. I mean, one of the consequences of self-less may be the way Mother Teresa lived, right? But there's something more basic than that. Self hyphen less, like an apparition. So there's a lightness to this, like an apparition, like a rainbow, like a phantom, that meaning not supernatural, okay? Phantom as in, temporary arising, giving the illusion of something substantial, but ultimately without any basis. So if we were to use the word ego, ego has no basis. Ego is a temporary manifesting condition, has no basis beyond that temporary. That temporary appearance. This is the more basic insight that we need to have. And when our egolessness, when our non-egotistical ways come from this place, then it's liberating. And free and light. But if it comes from a place of judgment, then it's heavy, then it's burdensome, then it's counterproductive. This supreme freedom of a human life, so long awaited, now at last attained, reflecting always, thus maintain your mind as steady as Sumeru, king of mountains. I like the contrast that he uses. The verse before, he is emphasizing the virtues of the apparition-like, to be able to see that self is a temporary occurring phenomena, having no basis at all. So even selfishness is but a fleeting thing. If you recognize its fleetingness and don't give it more power beyond that moment, that fleeting moment, let it dissolve, let it dissolve, let it dissolve. Then the next verse, now the king of mountains, Sumeru, Mount Everest, and be steady and maintain your mind like that. This contrasting images. I like this. If, O mind, you will not be aggrieved when vultures with their love for flesh are tugging at this body all around, meaning, when you're dead. Why are you so besotted with it now? O mind, do you protect this body, taking it to be your own? You and it are each a separate entity. However can it be of any use to you? Why, O foolish mind, don't you appropriate a clean form carved in wood? How is it fit to guard an unclean engine for making of impurity? This is somewhat based on the Abhidharma, another division of the Buddha's teachings that discusses how life begins, like in this lifetime. There are many, right? The particular instance of how life begins, it says, when your father's sperm impregnates, your mother's ovum, right? And that is the moment, it says, when your consciousness latches on to the union of those two substances and calls it me. So then he says, this mind is so weird, towards the combination of these two things, it gives rise to this idea of me, and then mine. He says, isn't it better if you take possession of something like created from, say, sandalwood and say me and mine. Because elsewhere, right, if you see a drop of sperm, on your coffee table, you're like, ah,
Oh, dear.
but, in other contexts, then from there, the whole big hoo-ha, keeps growing and growing and growing, and this is mine, this body is like, where did all of this come from? It came from some other people, which in a different set of circumstances, you would run as far as you can. Yeah, so he's pointing out, right, the absurdity, of what we're so committed to. And so he's not teaching you to develop hate towards this body. So we have to be careful about what is said here. And I think sometimes Buddhists take this in the wrong direction. And certainly culturally, there has been times you can see, certain kind of very extreme views towards the body gets developed by reading these passages out of context. What is the intention here? Here he is, right, inviting us to engage in, right, a mental exercise, an intellectual exercise, and from that exercise, some clear seeing emerges. That's the goal. The goal is not to make you detest or hate this body. After all, right? Attachment and aversion are both products of confusion, ignorance. So you can use either attachment or aversion skillfully. If you have the skill, if you have ability, you can use those two to give rise to insight, to destroy confusion or ignorance. But if you forget what is the purpose, which is to destroy ignorance, then when you employ any instruments that involve attachment or aversion, it can backfire. So this is important to know. So, I'm afraid I have to stop here. I taught a class this morning, and then in between, I was able to slip in some of my own daily things that I have to do, my practice. Now on to my next commitment for Sunday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
So,
As always, you really helped me understand this chapter.
good. Yeah, you all are very admirable and diligent in attending Sundays. May EBS continue to be a refuge for all of you, and for maybe some new people that need some solace, some sanity. But also remember, you may have people who come in who have a different set of fears, a different set of anxieties. Likewise, what we want to provide refuge is for something that is deeper, and not just create a club where our political, ideological ideas all align the same way. So, but right now, I think it is a refuge for a particular, but the bottom line, let us not be downcast by the warring wants of childish persons quarreling their thoughts are bred from conflict and emotion, let us understand and treat them lovingly. What a beautiful
Yeah.
verse here, right? So go share it with everyone, share it on your social media if you're on social media, so that you will remind yourself of this.
Yeah.
Okay, ta-ta.
Hi.
We'll continue. Yeah, those of you at EBS, enjoy each other, continue. And then those of us on Zoom, or at least for me, ta-ta.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Oof.